Almost nobody ever tells you it's impossible to think your way out of chronic dissatisfaction. That's not because you're not smart enough or because you haven't tried hard enough. Strangely, it's because thinking is the very mechanism that generates the dissatisfaction in the first place. This is not some religious claim that is justified by nothing except faith. It's an important, hard-headed conclusion you can verify by your own experience. And it's also one that recent neuroscience supports. My name is Dennis Bradford. I'm a philosopher, a lover of wisdom. I have a doctorate in philosophy from the University of Iowa. I spent 32 years teaching college students how to think at the deepest level. Just so we're clear, to think is to conceptualize, judge, categorize, classify, sort. Thinking is useful because it performs conceptual work. What I eventually discovered, the hard way, is that thinking, as valuable as it sometimes is, has a ceiling. Always, one must pay the price. With respect to thinking, that ceiling or price is why most rational, thoughtful people remain chronically dissatisfied, no matter how much they achieve, understand, gain, or accumulate success. Successful thinkers enjoy the rewards of being able to think well, which helps to explain why they tend to get stuck thinking and are unable to transcend it. In the next 12 minutes or so, I want to show you exactly why that is and what actually works to get unstuck. It's ironic, but the truth is that getting unstuck from compulsive thinking enables you to become an even better thinker. Intellectual honesty matters to me. If it matters to you, you'll permit me to be radically honest about evidence. Epistemology is the study of apprehension. Its central concept is the concept of evidence. Epistemologists distinguish two kinds of evidence. The first is demonstrative evidence. It's the kind of evidence that yields certainty or knowledge in the strict sense of the word knowledge. 2 plus 2 equals 4. A red is a color. A square has 4 sides, and so on. Such judgments are demonstrably true and knowledgeable. To know something is to find mistake in believing it inconceivable. We have very little knowledge of this kind, far less than most people assume, as well as far less than we'd all like. The second is non-demonstrative evidence. This is the kind that yields rational beliefs, working hypotheses, reasonable opinions. All everyday and scientific claims fall into this category. If a proposition could be mistaken, it's simply not knowledge. This is why scientific theories sometimes are overturned as paradigms shift. That doesn't happen in arithmetic. For our purpose, this specifically includes neuroscience and everything I'm about to share with you about the brain. The takeaway is that we should begin with epistemological humility. Socrates always started there, which is a chief reason why he's so admirable. For example, perception is the source of our everyday understanding of reality. It's a source of knowledge about so-called external objects. Really? No. If you're seeing a tree over there, do you know that it is real, or could you be mistaken? You could be mistaken. You know that you seem to see a tree over there now, but perhaps you are only dreaming that you are perceiving the tree and don't realize you're dreaming. Perception is your evidence for believing there's a tree over there now, but it would be foolish to bet your life on its being real because it's possible to think how you could be mistaken. Another example, if you do not have a brain, recent progress in neuroscience is irrelevant to you. You are rational, you believe that you have a brain, you've never heard of a living human being who didn't have a brain. However, it's false that you know that you have a brain. Mistake in believing that you have a brain is possible. However uncomfortable, this kind of clarity here is important. Philosophers of science ask the fundamental questions about science. They, as well as scientists themselves, agree that, strictly speaking, it's false that science is a source of certain knowledge. That's why I'm not attached to any particular scientific theory, and you shouldn't be either. Some are useful, and those that are less useful often get replaced. What the neuroscience of the last 25 years points to may be refined or overturned by the neuroscience of the next 20 years. That's how science works. Such intellectual progress is valuable. Lying to ourselves about the quality of our evidence is not. Here's the extremely important practical insight about recent models in neurology. They have been independently confirmed by every serious contemplative tradition in human history across thousands of years and dozens of cultures, without any of them having access to brain scanning equipment or those models. That convergence matters because it has a very practical implication. In the next few minutes, my task is to point that out. Your task is, if necessary, to detach from any obstructive beliefs that are hijacking and blocking you from noticing the connection. The problem with your brain. In the 1960s, an American neuroscientist named Paul MacLean proposed what became one of the most widely taught models in popular psychology, the triune brain theory. His basic idea was that the human brain evolved in layers. An older reptilian layer governing instinct and survival evolved first. Then a middle mammalian layer governing emotion and memory evolved. Finally, a newer neocortical layer governing rational thought and language evolved. Mother Nature gave us a whole brain composed of 3 parts. That was the theory. His key insight, and this part holds up regardless of what happens to the rest of the model, was that these 3 layers do not always cooperate. The older, faster, more powerful systems can hijack the newer ones. For example, you can have a sound, rational belief that you are overreacting and still be completely hijacked by fear, anger, or shame. That's not a character flaw, that's hardware. This is why psychotherapists like Dr. Mark Waller or coaches like Eben Pagan could use MacLean's theory to achieve beneficial results for patients and clients, even if MacLean's model wasn't completely accurate. In fact, his model has since been largely set aside by contemporary neuroscientists. Why? The brain turns out to be more integrated than his three-layer picture suggested. However, MacLean's insight survives and has been refined. An inadequate theory can still be beneficial. What replaced it, or rather what extended it, is the default mode network, the DMN theory. DMN is a set of brain regions that activate when you're not engaged in a focused external task. In other words, when you allow your mind to drift, to be left to its own devices, when you become, as we often say, lost in thought. That's a familiar experience, and it turns out to be an important one. What does the DMN generate? Rumination about the past, worry about the future, self-criticism, mental rehearsal of conversations that already happened or haven't happened yet, the internal narrative about who you are, what someone else did, what might go wrong, what you should have said or done. In other words, it generates self-talk, the voice in the head. Bluntly, DMN generates compulsive, involuntary thinking. In effect, as Philip Kapleau put it, we become addicted to incessant thoughting. So, why does that matter? It matters because it connects the source of dissatisfaction with what unnecessarily comes to be our default condition. Separation is the source of all dissatisfaction. Does being separated from, say, your spouse or your usual good health or your dream home make you happy or unhappy? Separation from what we value makes us unhappy. Since thinking is classifying, it necessarily requires separation. This is why there's no such thing as a thought that is wholly true. All thoughts are partial, in the sense that, at best, a thought may only be partially true, perspectival. Since neuroscience now informs us that thinking has become our default condition, which everyone who ever thought seriously about the issue already acknowledged, and since that means we're always separating experiences, it should come as no surprise that we're incessantly dissatisfied. That's the problem. That's the perpetual source of unhappiness. What's new is that we have brain scientists telling us that we are incessantly thinking, ruminating, worrying, considering, hoping, fearing, judging, and so on. Sages have told us that for literally millennia. Science now confirms it. Here's the good news. There's a solution. What's the solution? Science now also confirms the solution that, in essence, is the same one that sages have been recommending for millennia, namely, that meditation works to quiet thoughts and become more peaceful. As Gautama, the historical Buddha, put it 2,500 years ago, quote, "There can be no wisdom for those who do not meditate," end quote. The DMN network is measurably quieted by meditative practice. That is not a claim made only by monks and monasteries. It shows up on brain scans. It's been replicated in scientific study after study. There's nothing woo-woo about it. This implication is significant because it's life-affirming. What every serious contemplative tradition in human history independently discovered, that there is a way to quiet the mental noise that generates suffering, turns out to have a measurable neural correlate. Why thinking makes it worse? The chief implication is what most people miss, and it is the part that changes everything once you understand it. The abiding bliss of sages comes from manifesting what follows. Thinking cannot solve the problem of compulsive thinking. Every attempt to think your way out of chronic dissatisfaction adds more thinking to the system that is generating the dissatisfaction. It's a bit like trying to put a fire out by adding more wood because the wood you're adding looks different from the wood that started the fire. Therapy helps many people in many ways. I'm not dismissing it. However, if you have ever sat in a therapist's office understanding your patterns with perfect clarity and still felt them running your life, you already know what I mean. Understanding is not dissolving. Affirmations, positive thinking, reframing, and similar practices and techniques, same category. More thinking aimed at the thinking problem. Temporarily useful at best. The DMN does not respond to argument. It does not respond to insight. It does not respond to willpower. It responds to one thing: withdrawal of attention from thought itself. That withdrawal has a name. Different contemplative traditions call it different things. Zen calls it no thought or mu. Eckhart Tolle often calls it presence. Others call it opening to being or stillness, or use different words or phrases to denote it. The name doesn't matter. What matters is the mechanism, and the mechanism is the same, regardless of what it's called. Let's agree to call meditation presence practice. There are different kinds of presence practice. There is no one kind that works best for everyone. They are essentially ways of letting go, surrendering to reality, accepting the world as it is. It's the way of non-attachment that yields direct awareness of stillness or spaciousness or unlimited emptiness or being. So it's false that presence practice is about gaining or achieving or accomplishing or doing anything. The present moment, just as it is the starting point. It's always the starting point. It's never not now. What exactly works? Presence practice is not relaxation, it's not positive thinking, it's not visualization. It's the deliberate withdrawal of attention from compulsive involuntary conceptualizing and the redirection of that attention to direct non-conceptual awareness of what is actually present. It's critical to notice an important relevant fact. We are free to decide on what to focus awareness. Some researchers, like Viktor Frankl, have called that our greatest freedom. What it means in this context is that we're able to make a conscious choice whether to think about something or not. Mastering the art of presence practice is mastering the art of letting go of compulsive thinking. There's nothing wrong with thinking or mastering the art of thinking well. It's valuable. It's a great way to solve many problems. However, it's as if it's so valuable that we cannot stop doing it. Thinking is a kind of doing. When we are incessantly busy doing, we miss being. We are human beings, not just human doings. Abiding fulfillment requires a balance between doing and being. Yet most people act as if the being dimension is non-existent. That's the way to abiding dissatisfaction. Non-attachment is the way to abiding satisfaction. A pure presence practice is living being. That's all. There's no technique. It's like shikantaza or just sitting in the Zen tradition. It's the simplest possible presence practice. But over the centuries, sages have developed multiple other techniques that are often more effective. These are often called spiritual practices because the word spiritus in Latin refers to a breath or wind, and since the breath is always available, it can be used as an effective focal point to let go of all thoughts. Do not confuse spiritual with religious. Typically, creeds are essential to religions, and creeds are lists of thoughts to be accepted by true believers. The point of a spiritual practice is to transcend all thoughts, all beliefs. What you are actually practicing is withdrawing attention from the DMN's output, from the narration, the rumination, the compulsive mental chatter, and anchoring it in direct present moment experience. That's an opening to being itself. The mental noise does not usually stop immediately, but it begins to loosen its grip. With consistent and repeated practice, daily without skipping sessions, it loosens further. All presence practices are nurturing practices. The more one practices, the better one feels. That's why it's sometimes said that sages are always meditating, even as they go through their everyday tasks. I have maintained a minimum of 2 hours of formal presence practice every day for years. I did not begin there. I began with 20 seconds. A presence practice tends to grow naturally after a while because its results are self-reinforcing. As chronic dissatisfaction diminishes, the motivation to practice increases. That's not theory for me. My personal calibration on Hawkins's map of consciousness, the 1,000 level logarithmic scale measuring all the possible energy levels of human consciousness, has risen more than 150 levels over the course of my own practice. I mention that not to impress you, but to be honest. I'm reporting what I've actually experienced, not what I've merely read. Permit me to summarize these initial insights into 3 takeaways. 1, the human brain has a default program, the default mode network, that generates compulsive, involuntary thinking whenever attention is unfocused. That program is the primary engine of chronic dissatisfaction. 2, Thinking harder cannot fix the problem of compulsive thinking. Every serious contemplative tradition in history has independently arrived at this same conclusion, and recent neuroscience supports it. 3. What works is presence practice. The disciplined withdrawal of attention from compulsive thought and its redirection to direct awareness of what is actually present. This is a learnable, practical skill. It's measurable, which makes it easier to master. It can be measured not only in the labs of neuroscientists, but also by Dr. Hawkins' map of consciousness. It works to produce abiding peace of mind. If what I've said here resonates with you, if you recognize the chronic dissatisfaction I'm describing, and you're genuinely interested in a way through it that doesn't require you to believe anything on faith, I've developed a short program that walks you through this in detail. It covers the neuroscience more thoroughly. It introduces the map of consciousness as a practical tool for measuring progress, and it gives you alternative presence practices that have worked for me and for people that I've helped. The program is available at dennisbradford.com/presence. It is not expensive. Unlike some other programs you've probably tried, it addresses the root of the problem rather than its symptoms. The chronic dissatisfaction you feel is not a character flaw. It's not a sign that something is permanently wrong with you. It is the predictable output of a brain running a program that no one taught you how to interrupt. You can learn to interrupt it at any age. It is not necessary. Not only is abiding inner peace available and possible, it's possible for you. That's what presence practice is about. Peace.